Have you ever signed a contract, maybe over a golden fiddle, perhaps, or a lesser silver fiddle? Or maybe you signed away your voice so that you could go off and seduce a prince from another species that you're not capable of mating with. I'm on a tangent. The point is, contracts are a real thing, and contractual obligations are things that the toy industry tends to, well, not openly talk about enough. So let's dive in because it's one of the reasons that a lot of the things that's going on with the collector community is happening right now. The toy industry, action figures, and contractual obligations. Hey guys, welcome back to Spectre Creative. I'm your host, Scott Toy Guru Neitlich, and I am in the middle of a horrible allergy season here in North Carolina. So if I look like crap and try to make it through this video without sneezing, that's why. So it's like 2 weeks. It's like 2 weeks of the whole year. All right. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. Is my 2 weeks of allergies is contractual obligations. And what is that? Well, obviously, in any business sense, when two companies get together and form a partnership, you are usually obligated to do one thing or another, whether it's deliver something or produce something or, provide a service, murder for hire, who knows? You can have contracts for anything these days. No murder. The Spectre Creative does not endorse murder for hire. People just don't understand parody these days. So, how does this affect the toy industry? Well, let's look directly at what's going on with things like Star Wars and Marvel Legends and some other licensed properties. Obviously, Transformers, G.I. Joe, and He-Man don't really fall into this because they're homegrown. They're IP. Really only talking about when you license something is when there's a contract. So one of the big things that's come to light recently through, the Yahoo Finance interview with Chris Cox that I've done a couple videos on is that action figures really do cost more than we give them credit for, or rather than we're even paying. So, for example, we're paying about $25, right, for a new figure and some blast effects, and there's a build-a-figure piece around it or somewhere. But they cost even more than that for the manufacturers or Hasbro's or Mattel's. And Hasbro's talked about in this article about how they've been deliberately cost reducing figures for the past years to get them to keep that $25 price point. So like Fabian Cortez's shoulder pads, whatever you want to call this harness, it's unpainted plastic. As opposed to, years ago, this would have probably had a beautiful wash on it. And we'd probably get even more deco hits. Although, I don't know, he doesn't, he's a cheap figure to do. He doesn't need that much deco, but they still, and so this has been a way to keep figures at $25 because I think the feeling was that $30 would be too much. So this is part of actually a larger issue, and that's why I'm talking about contractual obligations. So why would Hasbro even be making figures if it costs them so if the profit margin's so small as Chris mentioned, and Chris, my buddy Chris, actually I do know the president of Hasbro, but that's not important right now. I don't know Chris Cox. I haven't met him. He's the CEO. So it's funny how they have a CEO and a president. All right, not important right now. So okay, so yes. So why would he continue to he talked about how the margins are so small on action figure lines. Why are they even making them then? Well, they weren't this small even 5 years ago. So much has changed, and even 10 years ago. The two biggest things are the cost of labor has skyrocketed, and royalty costs have also skyrocketed. Back in the 80s they were at 1%. Now you're talking royalties at 20% plus is not unheard of. Not that there's a happy medium in the middle there, but some of the top tier properties are over 20%, which even, back in 2012, those same properties were at, 12, 14%. So that's a big jump in royalties and labor costs. Just, Google any, graph on labor in China, and you'll see that an arrow going in that direction. I always forget that this thing's flipped. So when contracts were signed, and these are, Marvel, DC, Star Wars, these are usually, 5-year, 10-year contracts. Some of these factors didn't exist, especially the costs. And also what was going to happen with the content. The content, you're basically signing up for, when you're signing a major brand, one of the A-list brands like that, um, you are banking on the strength of the brand and betting on the new content that it's going to be good. And we all know that there's been some Marvel content and some Star Wars content that has underperformed. There's also been Star Trek content that's underperformed. Lots of stuff's underperforming. What's performing well these days? Stranger Things? I don't know. So the basically, yeah, so we'll just use Hasbro and Marvel for the moment as a good example, since they've had that contract now for, it started when, 2011, 2010. I'll have to Google it, but around then. And the Hasbro doesn't get to control what happens with the content, but they're obligated under the contract to support it. So it's why we see things like so many toys from things like Eternals, or even like Black Panther 2. Although that's a whole other subject about sequels getting more toys than they deserve. But some of the other, the Marvel Legends that are piling up at Ollie's, that's why I brought up Black Panther 2. A lot of those movies, and the Eternals is probably the best example, wouldn't have gotten toys unless they were required to make them. Was that English? So Hasbro made the Eternals line because they were obligated to make it. And they're same with like on Star Wars, like figures of like Acolyte or Skeleton Crew, two contents that are arguably on the poorer side. Okay, and here's another example over on the Mattel side. So enough picking on Hasbro. When I was at Mattel, working on Matty Collector, the adult collector website, which is now Mattel Creations, more or less, we helped acquire the Ghostbuster license for Mattel. And part of the acquisition of the license was the fact that Mattel had this Matty Collector venue and could distribute collector product. Sony really liked that because it was a good way to prime the pump and get collectors excited for the new movies that were coming out. This was back in 2014, 2013, well before even the female Ghostbuster movie, let alone all of the Paul Rudd movies. So point being is when Sony and Mattel came together for that partnership. Part of getting rights to the classic Ghostbusters for Matty Collector was Mattel was obligated to make toys for the next movie. They were betting on Ghostbusters as a brand and the strength of the vintage, property, and the vintage line was, the vintage animated line was one of the most successful financial toy lines of all time. That's a whole other video. But yeah, so same kind of thing. As the other examples, yeah, Ghostbusters, you're betting on the strength of the brand and agreeing to make toy products for future content without seeing that content, just knowing that it will be in this case, Ghostbuster brand. And what did that content turn out to be? It turned out to be the 2016 movie, which bombed at the box office and in the toy aisle. But Mattel was obligated to make those toys because that was part of the overall Ghostbusters license, but you can understand why it would require, okay, you want to make toys of the line? Great, you can do that, but you have to make toys for the next movie. And back in 2013, 2012, like, yeah, where do I sign? I get toys of classic and the next movie? Not knowing that the next movie was not going to be the greatest Ghostbusters movie ever. Because the contracts that were signed years ago, when they were signed based on the power of the brand and the existing content, were betting on that strength and future content working. And that's a big reason why we have such a pileup and why you see, why so many figures produced during, say 2019, 20, and 21. And that's kind of like what we're seeing at Ollie's. There were a lot of projects that if a toy company could see the content first, probably would choose not to make toys based on it. Let's put it that way. So that's it. It's when you want to own or be part of a big mega A-list brand like that, like Star Wars, DC, Marvel, that's part of the cost of doing business, is that you're betting on the strength of the brand and being obligated to support it. And that explains a lot of the toys we've been seeing and why so many toys were content that fans weren't quite on board with. I hope I was polite enough. So I wasn't trying to insult anyone with this video. Just provide facts. Okay. My allergies are killing me. I'm going to call it a day. Thanks for watching. Thank you for sharing. It's the best way to support this channel, and I will see you in the next video.